everyone. Thank you very much to the Digital Leadership Forum for having me today. So I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be stating the case for bold digital marketing in 2021. So let's get to it. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with a phrase like this. Marketers will often use the term, "we aren't exactly saving lives," as a kind of comforting statement. But in 2020, it doesn't take too much of a stretch of the imagination to see that bad decisions could actually cause a lot of damage. And actually, businesses have had massive responsibility thrust upon them during the pandemic. So earlier this year, we surveyed over 7,000 global consumers, asking them about who they trusted to keep them informed on COVID-19. Just over 50% said that they trusted businesses, and that's the same number who selected the media. So the same survey also asked people whether they trusted measures to keep them safe in different scenarios. So business and employer measures were trusted more than government ones. So that's a lot of responsibility, like I said, for businesses and the comms that they're putting out. And all the while, many marketing teams saw members put on furlough, stretching resources just as things were at their most stressful. I'm sure you've all felt some of this. So all of this together caused a lot of teams to go into fight or flight mode. Some froze and suffered backlash when their silence was noted. Some moved way too fast and misjudged things, opting for knee-jerk campaigns or gestures that just didn't go down very well. I know of clients of ours that did both. Some people were just not very happy with how they handled the pressure. Others have said that, they felt they were doing the right thing at the time, making a charitable donation, but actually there was a backlash because people were saying, that wasn't enough. So they're looking to understand what they could have done differently so they know for next time. So as we look ahead to 2021, there is a lot that we can be learned by looking back. But there's also plenty of action that can be taken to ensure that better decisions are made moving forwards and that agility can be accompanied by confidence. This is all about having the right information to hand at the right time. So being informed and being agile are not mutually exclusive. You can move quickly based on the best data available. It's all about having the right data and processes you need ready to go. So on our quest for bold digital marketing in 2021, we should move away from trying to be very informed or very agile. The goal should be to be both. So to bring this to life a little bit more, I'm going to talk through 3 use cases that are key for many Brandwatch users. How do we do these while being informed and being agile? For each, I'll share examples, talk about how we suggest clients approach these use cases, and give you some questions to think about that can go some way to informing your approach in 2021. So campaign management, it's a huge subject. You've got kind of campaign ideation, planning, you've got mid-campaign kind of course correction, and then wrap reporting at the end. But the thread that goes through all of this is having the right data. So we'll start with ideation and planning. I think it's very, very important to have objectives first. What do we want this campaign to achieve? How will we monitor it? And importantly, having that monitoring set up in advance. I'd also like to point out the power of historical data. So what campaigns have done similar things in the past? What have they achieved? It's fine to look sideways across your sector, but also to look at aspirational brands who have achieved what you want your campaign to. Third is a social collage. So where can we find inspiration? There is so much insight to be gained from the internet, I think, not just across the obvious places like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but also across forums and all over the place. So a client of ours likes to take actual social media posts from consumers into their planning and brainstorming sessions, just to kind of have that visual aid and keep the voice of the consumer at the forefront. So campaign management and ongoing iteration. A great example of ongoing iteration is from a case study we have with Co-op and their reverse advent campaign around Christmas time. So they launched the event and it was going great, but they found that hype around it began to dip around December the 10th. So they reacted really quickly and created a mini campaign within the wider one, and they were able to drive that conversation right back up. The campaign had really, really excellent results. If you're interested, you can click that little link in the corner when you receive the slides to find out more about how Co-op used Brandwatch. But essentially, this this sort of small case study is all about. Really course correcting as you go, keeping an eye on the data and making sure that campaign fills out the aims that you have. And then finally, it's RAP reporting. So this is where your team can ask key questions that will inform the next campaign. And because you've monitored everything in advance, RAP reporting should be really easy. All the data is there, ready to go. So here are some questions to think about in terms of campaign management. So before, how do our actions, whether that's execution of the campaign or monitoring its performance, relate back to those key organizational objectives? Are our actions based on assumptions or on data? If whatever target it is that we're going for is not being met, how do we make adjustments? Where were our blind spots when we look back? Where were things kicking off that we might not have expected? And what did we not see coming? Next up, and kind of closely related to campaign management, especially in ideation, is trend spotting, which is something our clients are asking us more and more about. So my colleague Ben Ellis, who's a senior research consultant, says that trend spotting is a journey, not a destination. He says at any one time, you only really understand as much as the last insight you received about your consumers. If you don't tap into those conversations regularly, you can't confidently say you know your consumers. So it's really important to keep that kind of real-time tracking, knowing exactly what is emerging in those conversations. So I've got kind of two examples here of tracking trends that come from known sources and unknown ones. So firstly, a client that we have found using Brandwatch that one of their products was being used by healthcare workers on their faces to make personal protective equipment more comfortable throughout the day in the pandemic. So this use case for their product was previously completely unknown. It was actually a product for a completely different body part. But the company could easily pick up on the trend because they were monitoring conversation around their product names. They knew exactly what it was being used for, even though it was unexpected. And then the second example is about people creating homeopathic hand sanitizers, which is something that would only happen in 2020. But unless a brand in this field was monitoring kind of general conversation about hand sanitizers, they wouldn't know about this kind of new entrant to the market, albeit an unofficial one at the time. So it's really important to kind of track, what your brand name, your products, but it's also really important to look more broadly at your kind of sector, your area, your category, and understand what is emerging in the field. And next on trend spotting, I think it's really important to experiment with different data sources. It's easily done when you're not in delivery mode all the time, which I totally understand, but I'd really recommend, if you have the chance to experiment with different data types. An example here is a fairly obvious one, but it's looking at mentions of people wanting sun cream, suntan lotion, alongside sunshine hours. So this is a really kind of obvious correlation between the two, but completely counterintuitively, if you look at people talking about how much they want ice cream, it's actually when it's cold outside. So you'd think it was when it was warm, but everyone wants to just settle down with a tub of Ben and Jerry's when it's cold. So questions to ask about trend spotting. Where in the world are we seeing trends emerge? We have a client who sells hairstyle equipment, and they found that actually trends were emerging first in Korea and then spreading kind of throughout the world. So they found that if they kept an eye on what trends were emerging in this part of the world, they would actually get ahead of their competitors, release products earlier, and then really get that competitive advantage. Are we searching as broadly as possible for potential trends? So again, in physical spaces, but also digital locations, are we looking at these kind of obscure forums that might actually have a lot of insight for us? How do we build these trends into our current or new campaigns? Can we create something reactive? And also, should we action this data? Not every trend that comes out from your data analysis should necessarily should be actioned, whether for ethical reasons or other. And then finally, crisis management. Sadly, things don't always go to plan, but when we think about crisis management at Brandwatch, we're all about getting alerted as early as possible, monitoring in real time, and where possible, turning a crisis into an opportunity. So first of all, here's an example from that co-op case study I referenced before. In this case, the team had set up Brandwatch alerts in advance that would notify them immediately when someone mentioned something dangerous at a store. So in this example, it was a store fire. At 2:15, they were alerted to a tweet about a fire at a shop. By 2:20, they'd flagged it internally with the wider organisation, and within the hour, they'd ensured that everyone was safe and crafted a message for the media in case there were any requests. So this is one of many examples of a social or digital team being alerted to something quicker than much of the rest of the organisation. And we've got loads of examples of when alerts like this have come in really, really useful in crisis situations. So let's talk about a full-blown crisis. It's all kicking off and you need to understand what's happening in real time. If you have a brand where people are mentioning your name thousands of times an hour, that can be a real struggle for analysts or for marketers to manually sift through. But something that we actually built to counter this is Brandwatch. Brandwatch's AI assistant named Iris. So on the screen, you're seeing an example from a client of ours, and their brand was embroiled in a crisis. The red shows negative conversation, the green is positive, and the grey is neutral. This is measured by the hour, so you can see there's a lot of conversation going on. But you also see that there are little letters, and these are all markers where Iris has detected one or more particular drivers of the conversation. So if analysts want to know what's being received most negatively, they can just click on those N, E, B, C, or M, the red spikes, and find out exactly what is driving those mentions and react to them very quickly. So finally, not all crises have to end badly. So an example here is a client of ours, Bimbo, one of the world's most popular baked goods companies, released a limited edition cake in the US, and they had no idea that it would spark social media outrage within other markets. So using Brandwatch, Bimbo were able to spot and visualize the crisis in real time using the Visio platform, which was something we used to visualize our data. And they realized that, people in Mexico were absolutely outraged that this cake had not been launched in their country. So they implemented a campaign strategy for a launch in Mexico. They identified influencers to amplify the campaign, and they were able to measure the ROI of the campaign on social media. And what kind of started out as an outrage and a crisis turned into this $580,000 business opportunity. So a really nice result for them. So questions on crisis management. Are we confident that we'll be alerted early if a crisis is brewing? That's absolutely vital. Do we have the processes in place to deal with any kind of a crisis? And are we equipped to turn a crisis, where possible, into an opportunity? So as many of the examples I've gone through show, it is possible to be informed and agile. There is no need to freeze if you don't have the right data, or if you do, there's no need to freeze if you do have the right data even. And if you let the data guide you, if you really know your customers, you can act with confidence. So in 2021, be informed, be agile, and please be bold. Now you know.